Today, I'm going to be talking about the perfection of meditation, which is the fifth of the paramitas, or the transcendent virtues. And this is something that, of course, as we travel the path, we increase our meditative concentration. It's important to realize that these six paramitas do not stand alone, that they build on each other. You could say there's a feedback loop here, but they start with generosity. And the reason is that that is really where we start. Through generosity, then, we learn to be more concerned about other people, willing to lend a hand, understand others, and so forth. And then from there, we realize that we need more discipline if we really want to be kind to other people and be more generous, help them be happier. And also for ourselves, that we need to discipline our own mind, our speech, and our body. And then from that leads to patience, which is the real remedy for anger. But we realize that we have to have patience if we are really going to be generous, practicing generosity and practicing discipline, because when we're angry, our discipline goes out the window. And from that, then diligence arises. And I've talked about these already, but I'm just trying to review this to, you might say, get us up to speed with the fifth one, which is meditation. So through diligence, we are willing to exert ourselves more and more, because we realize there's more and more benefit from practicing meditation and doing chanting and so forth, studying and spending more of our energy and time and resources in the practice of Buddhism, that we find that we are happier and so forth. So in order to experience tranquility, which is really the core of meditation, is we need to practice patience and diligence, as I said. What we are doing with meditation is we are taming our mind, and it's not easy. It's time-consuming. Our minds have developed habitual patterns, usually negative habitual patterns, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and habitual patterns that have formed over that period of time are very strong, and it's very difficult to eliminate them, you might say, instantaneously or even quickly. So meditative concentration, the Tibetan word for it is samten, and this means firmness of mind. Oh, I do want to say at this point that I'm deriving the basis of my talk from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Dharma Paths, in the section on meditative concentration. And I also have included some points in Trungpa Rinpoche's book on the jewel ornament of liberation. But Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche uses the word samten, which means firmness of mind. Trungpa Rinpoche, Here is a quote from his book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. Quote, meditative concentration is the ability to control the mind and to have power over our mind so that we are able to do whatever we need to with the mind. End quote. That's on page 244. So meditative concentration is when the mind is undistracted, where the mind is firm, as Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche mentioned, and it is stable. It's not jumping around. So the terms calm and clarity are frequently associated with this meditative concentration. We're not caught up with entertainment. And needless to say, there are plenty of sources of entertainment out there. We seem to be most entertained by our own thoughts. So we're not caught up with our thoughts. We're not constantly seeking entertainment from external sources. We're not overwhelmed by distraction. That when the mind is in meditative concentration, it's not restless, it's not agitated, and it's not confused. That's a very important point. It's not confused. So basically, we learn to let the mind relax without an agenda, without a goal, to just let it be. Needless to say, well, it sounds very simple. It's extremely difficult to do because our mind really doesn't know how to do this. It's not used to this. Now, the faults of not having a stable mind are that basically your mind is out of control, out of your control. It's controlled by bad, harmful habits. Other people can control your mind. Advertisers can control your mind. When you are controlled by your emotions. Right now, because of politics in the United States, this is going on big time. Trungpa Rinpoche says, quote, this loss of control over our mind, the fact that our thoughts are controlling us and not vice versa, constitute the root of all our suffering and all of conditioned existence. End quote. That's on page 243 of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So that's a pretty serious statement here, that basically all of our suffering and the root of samsara is this lack of control we have over our mind. So the point is to get rid of our bad habits, cultivate good habits, gradually develop more and more control over your mind. Now, a mind that is stable rests in its natural state, which is clear. Sometimes lucid is used, sometimes luminous is used. It's free of thoughts. Uh, this is emptiness. But emptiness is not nothingness or voidness. What it really means is that it's full of potential. Anything can arise in the mind. But at this point, it hasn't arisen yet. Stable means settled, comfortable, content, relaxed. Frequently blissful, joyful, peaceful are used in describing this natural state. And of course, what it is it's our Buddha nature. It is our fully enlightened Buddha mind. So now Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche talks about the mundane approach to meditation and the spiritual aspects of meditation. Both of them have a certain relationship to physical isolation. That both approaches, mundane and spiritual, feel that there's a lot of chaos in the world and a desire to isolate oneself from at least some of that chaos. That you want to calm down. You want less agitation, at least for a while. And it's good to practice together. That when you practice together, you receive encouragement from the other people just being there in the space with you. And when you are practicing with others, you're also encouraging others to practice. There's nothing wrong with that. That quite honestly, many people find it much more difficult to practice alone by themselves at home than it is together in a group, especially when you are not doing the more advanced practices. And also when you practice together in a group, no matter what the practice is, whether it be shamatha or deity practices, or perhaps the Nyungne that we do here at the Hay River Center, that the merit that everybody accumulates in that session is shared by everybody else. So if you are practicing alone, you have created the merit of one person practicing for that length of time. If you practice with 10 people, you have created and shared 10 times that amount of merit. So it's very meritorious to practice together. And then, of course, to dedicate that merit to all beings that they may experience happiness and ultimately attain Buddhahood. Now, the wise, the people that are actually on a spiritual path with their meditation, realize that the agitation comes from within, not the outer world, or at least to some degree. As you travel the path more and more, you come to see this more and more clearly, that it isn't the outer world that is in chaos and out of control. It's our own minds. So when one pursues a mundane meditation path, it is for your own benefit. That you have dissatisfaction in life and you want to improve your daily experience. You want more peace and less restlessness, less chaos. You want to take a break from the daily routine, maybe even could call it a vacation. And you find that it helps you become more composed and centered to a certain extent, but you find that it's beneficial, even if it is just for a short period of time. Your motivation in this case would be based on the disappointment of the outer world, that finding the distractions and busyness of the outer world to be really not what they are cracked up to be, that you see other people falling for this, and it's really not truthful, it's deceitful. So you want to separate yourself from the world. At least sometimes. You might like spending time with nature, maybe spending time outside gardening in your gardens, flowers or vegetables or whatever, that you like being alone. And you become attached to the calmness and tranquility of meditation. You might even have an agenda against the material world, seeing the material world is evil, and so on and so forth. I'm on an email network out here, and the past few weeks they have been discussing, among other things, politics and materialism. And some of the people that have been contributing to this thread fall into this group. I don't know if they meditate in any way or another, but are against the materialism that exists in the world. But on the other hand, they don't see anything to replace it in terms of spiritual practice. And they're basically just against the American culture and have moved out here to get away from it. And I can relate to that, because when I moved out here, I kind of was coming from a similar place. But there's no spiritual underpinning to all of this. Interestingly enough, the question is, why is it that when I meditate my mind properly, my mind calms down and I can experience some relief, maybe even peace of mind and calmness? Why is it that the mind does this naturally? But that question here we'll go into a little more when I talk about the spiritual approach to meditation. There are benefits for this mundane meditation approach, that it reduces your harmful actions as you're not as influenced by negative emotions. Your attitude can improve towards yourself and towards the world. The drawback is that while your mind has calmed down some, nothing has been uprooted or fundamentally changed. And I will say this, that in a shrine room full of people, there are going to be some people that have this approach to meditation, that they are, they feel that this is what meditation is all about, and they're really not interested in doing a lot of other kinds of practices. Interestingly enough, I find that this kind of approach also has a certain arrogance about it, which is that the person feels that they are better than other people because they haven't been, you might say, seduced by materialism, seduced by the activities of the world, and so forth. So let's go into the spiritual approach to meditation. So this practitioner has realized that confusion is internal, at least to some extent, and that we need to work on our own negative emotions and confusion. That to some extent they realize the problem isn't that other people are pushing my buttons, that the world is pushing my buttons and setting me off and so on and so forth, is that I have these habitual patterns and so forth. And when things happen, they set me off. And I need to work on not being so out of control. So as we work on our own mind and practice meditation, our minds calm down. Our suffering reduces, even if it's just a little bit. And we start seeing suffering in others more. And this is the development of understanding others more deeply, understanding that others are also suffering like us, and other people are under the control of their emotions. And in a way, are suffering much worse than we are. So the motivation to practice is to, of course, benefit ourselves, but also to benefit others. That it's not just we're doing this for ourselves. And this is an indication of greater insight or knowledge. There still may be this desire to isolate, but not to escape from outer circumstances. You may do retreats from time to time, but probably your whole life is not going to be a retreat. That you've realized that circumstances aren't the problem, that it is your monkey mind, your emotional patterns and so forth, that is causing all of your problems, or at least many of your problems. It seems like no matter how much you meditate, you still may have problems with in the financial area, or problems with relationships and so on and so forth. But with a good meditation practice, you get a little more perspective of how important these things are and do not get carried away by them. And if you do, you regain your balance quickly. So when this inner landscape is worked on through meditation and practice, study, and so forth, both you and others benefit. You want to be less of a problem. You see yourself as causing a lot of problems and a lot of confusion in the past. And this is good. This is good. On the other hand, it's not good to then get all self-absorbed about what a bad person you were in the past. What is important is to see faults, and then resolve to do the work, learn the techniques necessary to change those faults, to get rid of the faults and develop good habitual patterns. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche uses the analogy of a contagious person who wants to avoid spreading the disease. It seems very appropriate in the world today. But this was a talk that he probably gave in the late 80s. And so this person, the approach to meditative concentration on a spiritual level is they self-isolate to heal and to protect others. But it's not that it will be permanent. What I have found, both in working with myself and working with other people, that an indication that your meditation practice is going well is that your mind calms down some, and as a result, you see more clearly, and your suffering decreases. You're less distracted as a result of that decrease in suffering. You're happier. And it all leads to seeing your faults more clearly, but it also leads to being more aware of other people and seeing how much suffering there is in the people that you encounter in your daily lives. When I was chaplain at a Wisconsin prison, I had this experience working with an inmate that I had a weekly meditation class where it was a combination of meditating and then I would give a teaching afterwards. And he attended regularly and he started meditating in his cell on a daily basis. And after a number of months, he came to me and he said, there's a lot of suffering in this prison. And it's not just the inmates, it's the staff. That the meditation had opened him up to see not only how inmates suffer, but also that the staff, the guards, that they are suffering too. And it was a very insightful observation. So it is important when this is happening to see this as a good sign, that your mind is calming down, that you're gaining some clarity, and as a result, insight, which is another word for wisdom, knowledge type wisdom, not the understanding of emptiness or experience of emptiness. In Dharma Paths on page 189, Rinpoche says this, quote, to apply the meditation practice effectively, we must first understand and recognize the present situation, the real condition of things, end quote. So again, what he's talking about is we need this insight to realize that it is internal, where we really need to do the work, and that externally, we need to understand at a deeper level the nature of the world. And this is where these teachings on things like impermanence and interdependence really come into play, that we have to realize that whatever is going on in the outer world, it is impermanent. Whether it be our possessions, our bodies, other people, our psychological state, the particular conflicting emotion that we seem to be obsessed with at the present time, and so forth, whatever we're worrying about, that all of this is impermanent. It doesn't last. The good things, the pleasant things, they don't last. The bad things, the unpleasant things, they don't last. And we really don't have that much control. So the first step is to try not to intensify these patterns as we are practicing meditation and studying, attending teachings and so forth. So this is why we meditate, is to help us not intensify these negative patterns that we have been following for lifetime after lifetime. We realize that meditation can lead to mental calmness, mindfulness, and so forth. But this isn't the goal. The goal is to develop awareness and good habitual patterns. So this is where the two, the mundane and the spiritual, separate. We're not trying to accomplish a certain, you might say, a state of mind, a level of consciousness, or whatever, an altered state of consciousness. I like to say that we're already in an altered state of consciousness, and that with meditation, we are trying to let ourselves be and attain an unaltered state of consciousness, which means doing as little as possible. So if we have calmness, mindfulness, concentration, and so forth, that's fine, but that is not the goal. And actually, what's more important than what happens when you're meditating is what happens when you get up off of the cushion and go about your daily life. And this is where the difference between mundane and spiritual approaches become very important and very obvious. You know, like, why are you meditating? So with the mundane approach, it would be, is the tranquility exactly what you want? And if that is the case, then you want more of it. And of course, it doesn't last. And when you're done, if you come in contact with the rest of the world, which it's almost unavoidable, how quickly does that calmness go away, disappear? As soon as you run into a difficult situation, run into a difficult person, have car trouble, get a telephone solicitation call, or whatever, stub your toe, you find that the calmness is gone, the tranquility is gone, the vacation is over with. And so forth. But with a spiritual approach, you want to change, you want to work on your habitual patterns. You want to become less of a nuisance and more helpful. So this is really good motivation to meditate. It's important to not get attached to the tranquility and the bliss. See any experiences that you have with tranquility and bliss as A, being temporary, and B, an indication that you need to practice more. What we're really doing is developing good habits. I like to use the example of driving on a trip. And the parallel is because we're traveling on the path with our practice. So let's say you want to go to Denver, Colorado, and you get on the interstate and you come across a sign that says Denver 350 miles. And so you would say, great, great. And you stop the car and get out and start doing selfies of yourself with this sign, and then post it on Twitter and Facebook. Well, you're not going anywhere. You're not in the car anymore. And you can look at that selfie all you want in the future, but that doesn't get you any closer to Denver. And so when signs of progress occur, what is important is to not grasp onto them, but to resolve to continue practice. Resolve to be of more benefit to yourself and others. And as I said at the beginning, that all these paramitas or transcendent virtues are interrelated, that as our meditative concentration increases, our mental clarity increases, our calmness, our insight increases, our generosity increases. We realize more the importance of ethical behavior. We have more patience, that things that would make us angry in the past don't seem to get us quite so upset. And we become more diligent. On top of that, our devotion to the teachings and the teachers increases as we see positive changes in ourselves. And this leads to the increase in our development of wisdom. And this is because this leads to the experience of vipassana or insight meditation. And through insight meditation, we will eventually experience emptiness. And this is the perfection of wisdom, the perfection of absolute truth, the experience of absolute truth. This is very different from reading about or learning about it. Experience is very different. So going back to a mundane meditation practice, if that is your goal, it becomes a bit like a cage, because you really can't go any further. There's nowhere else to go. And that eventually you'll stop meditating because you find that the calm and tranquility, no matter how hard you practice, does not last. You might even get mad at people when they cause your mind, which is out of control, to lose it and think that they're the ones that are the problem, rather than your lack of mental control. So with spiritual goals, you keep practicing properly and progressing. Shamatha is seen as a means for attaining the goal. And to do this properly, it requires work with a teacher, studying, contemplation, and especially practice. Practice leads to realization. The others lead to understanding. So intellectual understanding is what we gain from studying, contemplation, and even working with a teacher. The teacher can point to realization and will help with that all that the teacher can. But the bottom line is these are conceptual, and we are wanting to experience the non-conceptual. And so the conceptual part of Buddhism is like a finger that is pointing at the moon. The moon is realization. And what we have to do is, through the teacher, the study, the contemplation, we get an idea of what we are looking for. But we have to let go of the concepts and just plain experience. And we are the only ones that can do that. Nobody else can do that for you. The Buddha could not do that for his disciples. So we have to do the work through practice, and then study, contemplation, and in conversations with the Lama,